Thank you, everyone. It's a real testimony to how important bulky waste is by just looking about the number of people in the room. Bulky waste, as we know, goes by many names. We've monopolised one name by the title of this stream, but it's verge waste, it's hard waste, and it also really describes the plethora of collection systems that are out there. Each council would have different types of waste that they would accept, different processing contracts, different collection systems, and different data and reporting systems, and even within your own regional waste groups. And I guess my talk, I'm glad in some ways that I'm number 4 on the list, because I really appreciate the detailed kind of insights we got into some other councils and groups. And I think maybe the benefit of this talk will be to take a step back again, and I'm just going to paint a broad overview of where things are at with bulk waste, what the problem is, and do like a very kind of, I should be really sitting on that couch, because we're going to sit back and look at the pros and cons going down. It wouldn't be a waste conference if I didn't use at least the waste management hierarchy somewhere in my presentation, but we'll be looking from prevention to processing as to what some of the options are, and then what some of the where that leaves councils in terms of challenges and opportunities. So in terms of bulk waste, I think the Anne Prince audit from 2014 was very useful and very telling, although it was across the SS Rock councils. You could see, I think, the major takeout point is that furniture was 30% of the bulk waste stream, and that is common with audits across other councils in different areas. And between that, and that is between multi-use dwellings and single-use dwellings. And then we have wood, we have e-waste, we have plastic, but the predominant waste by weight and volume is furniture. And hang on to that point, because we will come back to it. And in terms of possibly why everyone is sitting in this room now, bulk waste is not going away. It is, it's going to be great when we get some of the updated data across all the different local governments in New South Wales, but for what's available up to 2014, you can see that for bulk waste compared to garden organics and other, which is everything else, it's within a 4-year period grew by 40%. And my guess is that between 2014 and now, we have followed this upwards trend. And we don't know whether that's because there's a particular material that's been growing or increasing, or there's been a broad increase against those items that we just saw in the composition audit. But the question is, the problem is not going to be going away, and it's just getting worse. And we joke around at work about IKEA-derived fuel as kind of a concept out there, but it's very interesting to look at where IKEA, I hate to do free advertising for them, but they're a very symbolic company when a lot of people talk about the bulk waste problem, because obviously a lot of the products that they make we end up seeing can be seen on the curb. And they're going towards a leasing model I was reading about recently. So I think there's an acceptance that their business model is not working. People want items that are more durable, but their profit margins still can't, they can't extend to a business where you're actually going to make products that last. And so whether they lease out a piece of furniture and it's going to last for the same amount of time, it's questionable. But I think that is why we're all sitting in the room, and a lot of this talk is going to be looking at, well, where do we go? What are the management options? And how much does processing actually get us out of this problem? So, our favourite pyramid, looking at it, I guess, within the context of bulk waste. Prevention obviously sits at the top, and that is avoidance. It looks at reuse and repair when we talk about reduction, and then recycling and recovery and disposal are often what would be the outcomes of our kind of mainstream processing options. So as the waste goes to the processing facility, obviously within the facility, depending on the type of technology, the level of labour that's applied within each facility will determine whether the percentage of items that would be recovered and sent onwards for recycling, or obviously going to landfill, or energy for recovery options. And within that system, I guess you can see collection as being the facilitator. So the type of collection that you will have could make it more, increase the potential for those items to be repaired or reused, and within a reverse logistics system ultimately, or perhaps they maximise the fate of those materials going straight to landfill, or obviously to different facilities depending on where it is. And if we look at the rates of recovery at the moment, we can see that this, as well as the 2014 data, but 80% of bulky goods and other, so that would obviously include a large proportion of that is furniture, represents the 80% out of the total is only gets 23% recovery. So that's a massive amount of the total waste stream that is being collected from the curbside that has a very poor recovery rate. And so what are the options in terms of lifting up this recovery rate? Is it going to come from the processing facility, or is it going to come from further up that hierarchy and trying to look at how can repair and reuse drive up that rate? And why is that important is because within Sydney Metro you could see that it's 66% of the total bulk waste collected is collected within Sydney Metro for obvious reasons about population centres, but only 22% of that is being recovered. So that kind of, I guess, generalisation that if you're in a city and you're closer perhaps to more processing options, isn't really, the data is not telling that story at the moment. Sorry. And I guess why would that be relevant for councils? Because although bulk waste, as the previous speakers were talking about, relates to illegal dumping and waste generation, ultimately the third target to increase the waste diverted from landfill is ultimately coming from also the bulk waste. As you all make improvements in the amount of waste you're recovering through your other curbside systems, as we see the increasing trend of bulk waste, the volumes growing, the costs increasing, but the recovery rates getting worse, it's going to be very hard for councils to reach that 75% target. So thinking about where do you go from there, we're starting at, I guess, the top of the hierarchy and prevention. And I really appreciate the previous speakers that went into some really interesting examples of reuse and repair. And within that, many people, thanks to the war on waste, have heard of such things as repair cafes, reuse centres. They often sit, I guess, outside of the core waste services that councils deliver. And if we look at reuse centres on their own, I guess some of the benefits would be that within a reuse facility, it's the opportunity to obviously accumulate the greatest number of items. It produces employment opportunities. It obviously reduces the landfilling of items, particularly for reuse centres that would be located, co-located with a landfill facility. And had the pleasure of going on the technical tour before this conference, and we saw some great examples where residents can't even go through the weighbridge before they go through a reuse centre, and encouraged to divert as much as they can. And no specialised technology is required apart from the weighbridge. And if you're within the regulated area, I guess some of the limitations of that is it can be extra burden of responsibility to measure all the incoming and outcoming waste. And because obviously the items that are reused and sold aren't liable for the levy, but it still needs to be accounted for within the facility reports. And it requires efforts for residents to actually go and make use of the facility. Obviously, there's a convenience issues when we're talking about behaviour change. There's potential OH&S issues with heavy or damaged items. And it requires land and space for a facility, opportunities for a facility to grow, facilities that have opportunities for storage, upcycling, repairing, loading, unloading, distributing. These are all factors that really sway into how well that reuse centre can perform for a council. I was just in Canberra on the weekend. I don't know how many people have had the chance to see the Green Shed, but they have a retail front in the main CBD area of Canberra and have that opportunity to have a reuse centre co-located at the landfill, but they also really heavily market a lot of their bric-a-brac material directly within the centre right next to, new homeware stores. So it can be very advantageous, but obviously comes with an added cost. And then in terms of repair activities, the benefits obviously are you can address those goods that are too damaged and extend the life. It still creates more job opportunities, and there's a lot of social good that comes from activities. People just have to look at examples of repair cafes, like the Albury Wodonga Cafe is one of the largest operating in the country. It has up to 60, I think, long-term volunteers that come and generously skill share and upskill the community in a whole range of different repair activities. But on the other side, the limitations of that are that, again, it requires the effort of residents to make use of the facilities and make time to go there. You do need those volunteers that come with a certain skill level, which is a bit more than having a simple reselling facility. And not-for-profit organisations particularly need access to a site that's secure for them. So there was a recent example of the Bower in Sydney that was evicted for a certain amount of time. The eviction was revoked, but because of that lack of sales over perhaps a 1-month period, it seriously jeopardised their operations. And it's perhaps something that councils can consider when they're developing a new council site, to actually make some space available that they can lease out at a low cost or come up with an arrangement. Really, that is very fast. Okay. Other examples are garage sales and online marketplaces. In terms of the collection options, the way to think about collection would be between infrastructure and the types of trucks that are used and the service delivery type. So in terms of the trucks, the flatbed trucks, which often collect mattresses, obviously have their advantages because of the biggest kind of the biggest benefit is that they do not damage the items. So a majority of councils would use compaction trucks at the moment, but in terms of the flatbed, less damage but higher cost because of the higher number of trips that you would need to take. There are trucks on the market at the moment that have both flatbed and compaction capabilities. So the advantages are they get the benefits of both types of trucks. The limitations are they might need to return to a facility earlier if the flatbed component of the truck fills up before the compaction area, and the expense can be quite prohibitive. In terms of the service delivery options, there's separation at the curbside. You can separate at the curbside or at a facility, or there's separation at the facility. And each of these different options have their benefits and their disadvantages depending on the types of materials that are collected, and the types of recovery rates that are needed. If you separate at the curbside, it's quite obvious that you will be able to perhaps get a higher value for the recoverables, especially if you collect it with a flatbed truck. There's more flexibility in what you can target, but it comes with a higher collection cost. And in terms of processing, thinking about all those options for reuse, repair, and collection, you get to processing. And processing is really the last defense, because at the end of the day, what are you trying to process at the moment? It really depends on the end markets. And something like metals and bricks and concrete would fetch a good market at the moment. But in terms of furniture and timber, perhaps at the moment they are good materials for process engineered fuels. The limitations of having PEF material is that there are limited facilities at the moment in New South Wales, and it's still only really looking at items that are higher up the chain. So it really is that residual bulk waste that it would be able to process. But it is a proven technology, and it does reduce reliance, obviously, on fossil fuels and improves diversion rates for councils. So in terms of what are the challenges when we take a step back and after reviewing going down the period for bulk waste, really top challenge is only less than a third of bulk waste materials are currently being recycled. We still have bulk waste streams that are highly mixed and variable. The volumes can fluctuate. It's costly and difficult to actually recover and to actually implement and integrate repair and reuse within your council systems. There's poor knowledge at the moment about what can be captured and reused. And if we go with business as usual, it's just going to get worse. There is no real business as usual option if the volumes are going to be increasing, and processing, collecting in a compaction truck and sending it to a processing facility is not going to improve the diversion potential. And so in terms of some options to think about, number one is just to remember that furniture is 30% of the bulk stream, of the bulk waste stream. So if you do support reuse initiatives, they go very hand in hand with trying to at least capture the furniture that is not damaged, and really optimise any reuse initiatives that exist within your LGA area. And that's really goes in terms of maximising those partnerships. So getting a sense of what are the materials at the moment in your stream that need minor repair, major repair, they're repairable but not repairable but recoverable, or not recoverable at all, will really help you determine what the potentials are. Establishing a pre-assessment scheme, quite similar to what Ride Council mentioned, that when a person calls up for a collection, you encourage them to really understand the state that bulk waste is in, and then really heavily promote what the reuse options are within your council. And similar again to Ride, making sure that there's facilities for bulk waste within any new developments that would really facilitate those collection systems. Similar to what SS Rock mentioned in their presentation, very similar in terms of really getting more kind of discretion over what options are at that processing stage through your tender specifications, and through the tender process, starting off with things like a market sounding exercise, just testing the market and understanding what the capability or interest is out there, developing joint tenders to maximise your volumes, investigating options that use thermal technologies, and really ensuring that the tender respondents specify the types of trucks they're using and the types of targets that they would reach for you within their diversion. And I'm just going to end with a happy story. I know that a lot of people do experience issues of illegal dumping around social housing, and this is just from Leeds Council in the UK. I thought it really nicely tied a lot of these ideas together, where the problem was high rates of reusable items were getting either disposed to landfill or illegally dumped. The council recognised the issue. They developed a business case to work with a lot of reuse organisations that had started in their area. There were 7 in total, and what they did was they decided, as a council, we are going to make ourselves a single point of contact. So any person from either the social housing organisations, a resident, will be able to call the council first, and we will develop a system where we come up with we would distribute each item to one of these organisations. No one else has to go to anywhere else but us. We have a project manager. We will come up with a stock system so we can track items and basically distribute. They would call up one of the organisations, and then the organisations would deal with the logistics. And so really all they had was a coordination role. And within the first year, over 450 items were diverted. It came to about 11 tonnes in total. The social housing organisations started to change their systems, where they would refurbish new homes with those reusable items. And the council themselves, I'm sorry that the image is quite small, but they changed their whole website and a lot of their marketing material to promote those reuse organisations as the very first option for collecting that bulk waste. And it was a really successful project, and I guess it's just a simple example of how small changes to the way that people get their information and access services can make a big difference. Thank you.